Alright, today's video is about a short story I found in one of my father's old magazines. Popular Aviation, March 1928. So we're going back quite a bit. Almost 100 years, but pretty cool. Good stuff, and happy to share this with you. So the story talks about a time in the Denver area when a local radio station, broadcast how to fly a plane in 10 lessons. And it was on a Friday night, I believe 8:30, and people would sit around the radio and pretend to fly a plane, not learn how to fly. You can't really fly a plane or learn how to fly a plane just listening to a radio, but they followed along with the skit, and they would, I guess, sit in their chair, grab a broomstick, and pretend to fly an airplane. So it was sponsored by Alexander Aircraft Company, with I guess you gotta check my notes here. Cloyd Clevenger. He was chief pilot of Alexander. I always call it Alexandria. I don't know why. I'm gonna throw that IA at the end. Alexander Aircraft Company, and they had Gene Lindberg. He was a newspaper humorist at the time in the Denver area. So those two together, Cloyd was teaching Gene how to fly, and Gene was coming back with some pretty hilarious responses to Cloyd's teachings, but pretty cool stuff. But what really caught my eye was that Alexander Aircraft Company, I was familiar with that name because my dad first learned how to fly an Eagle Rock in the early 1930s, so pretty cool. He graduated in 1935 from Burgard Vocational High School in the Buffalo area. So I'll throw a picture up here so you can take a look at it. But pretty cool. So I wanted to share this story with you. Trying to just read my notes here. But yeah, no, that sounds pretty cool. So this story is called A Chair, a Stick, a Radio by Willis Parker, and it talks about this radio broadcast in the Denver area. So hope you enjoy it. I'm Bill Riccio, and have fun. Picture this. It's March 1928. The sun has dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the plains and mountains of the Midwest and Rocky Mountain regions. Inside countless homes, families gathered around their trusty radios. Tonight, like every Friday evening, they're about to embark on an adventure, not by car or train, but by imagination. All they need is a kitchen chair, a broomstick, and a bit of curiosity. At 8 p.m. sharp, the voice of Chief Pilot Cloyd P. Clevenger of the Alexander Aircraft Company crackles through the speakers of KOA Denver. Welcome, aviators, his voice booms with enthusiasm. Tonight we take to the skies once more. For the next 15 minutes, listeners are swept into a world of clouds, cockpits, and roaring engines, all from the comfort of their homes. But this wasn't your ordinary radio program. A chair, a stick, a radio was unlike anything listeners had experienced before. The story of this innovative and whimsical broadcast was captured beautifully by Willis Parker in Popular Aviation magazine back in March 1928. Thanks to his writing, we get a vivid glimpse into this pioneering fusion of education and entertainment. Clevenger, with his calm authority, was the perfect guide, offering practical flight lessons to a public that largely saw airplanes as exotic and mysterious machines. His goal was ambitious, yet simple: to foster air-mindedness, a belief that aviation was not just for the daring few, but a frontier accessible to everyone. Of course, even the best teachers know that humor makes learning stick. Enter Gene Lindberg, the perfect foil to Clevenger's expertise. Gene was no ordinary co-host. Playing the role of a curious yet bumbling student, he turned every lesson into a comedic spectacle. "Hey, Clev," Gene would say, leaning into his persona, "if I steer straight, why does this plane go crooked?" Or with a grin, "Are you sure there aren't any holes in this air? Feels awfully thin today." Yeah. Gene had a knack for asking the kinds of questions many listeners were too shy or too polite to ask. His humor wasn't just entertaining, it was disarming, making the technical world of aviation feel approachable, even fun. To bring these lessons to life, the team at KOA employed every trick in the book. Electric fans roared into microphones to mimic airplane engines. When the plane was idling, the fan hummed softly. At takeoff, they turned it to full blast, creating a sound so realistic that listeners swore they could feel the vibrations in their living rooms. Every detail, from the whine of the engine to the roar of acceleration, was designed to transport the audience into the pilot seat. But let's not forget the setup at home. To fully immerse themselves, listeners were encouraged to grab a kitchen chair and a broomstick. The chair became the cockpit, the broomstick the control stick. In a clever move, Clevenger used this DIY setup not just for atmosphere, but as a teaching tool. With each command, listeners could simulate the movements of a real airplane. Hold the stick back as you accelerate, Clevenger would instruct. Feel how it keeps the tail down? Good. Now gently ease it forward for takeoff. The lessons themselves were as engaging as they were informative. One week, Clevenger would explain how to handle a stalled engine, preparing his students for the dreaded tailspin. Don't panic, he'd say. Just keep her cool and ease out of it. Another week, he might discuss the nuances of crosswind landings or the importance of keeping the wings level. And through it all, Gene was there, adding his signature flair. Crosswinds, huh? He'd quipped. Funny, these planes are the only things I know that go straight when you steer crooked. But this wasn't just a comedy show with a splash of aviation jargon. Clevenger knew how to inspire. When Gene asked, half-jokingly, if he'd make his first 500,000 by 1930, Clevenger seized the moment. There's demand out there, Gene, he'd reply. Salesmen, pilots, instructors. The sky's the limit if you've got the skills. And oh, the thrill of the imaginary solo flight. Listeners hung on every word as Gene, now flying solo, shared his thoughts. Holy cats, he'd exclaim, his voice filled with mock panic. Here I am, 500 feet up, and no Clev in the front seat. But what if I mess up? But then, as he banked his plane, confidence crept in. No skid, no slip. This thing works just well without him. Maybe, just maybe, I'm a real aviator. Beyond the humor and sound effects, a chair, a stick, a radio, was a masterclass in storytelling and persuasion. The program wasn't just about teaching people how to fly, it was about making them believe they could. And in that belief, something magical happened. Clevenger's book, Modern Flight, flew off the shelves. Visits to the Alexander Aircraft Company's aviation school surged. Listeners, inspired by the broadcast, took their first steps into the world of aviation. This wasn't just a radio show, it was a movement. It made people dream of flight, not just as a far-off fantasy, but as a tangible goal. And who knows, maybe some of those broomstick pilots went on to become real aviators, tracing arcs in the sky just as they did in their living rooms. As the lessons wrapped up each week, the laughter faded, the fans were switched off. One thing was clear. For 15 minutes, these listeners weren't just radio fans. They were aviators, soaring through the skies of imagination and ambition. And maybe, just maybe, some of them kept dreaming long after the broadcast ended. So next time you see a biplane in the sky, spare a thought for those Friday nights in 1928. A chair, a stick, a radio, that's all it took to bring the magic of flight into thousands of homes. And let's not forget to thank Willis Parker and Popular Aviation magazine for preserving this incredible story for generations to come. Alright, thanks for watching the video, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did putting this together. Really love sharing these stories with you guys, and if there's anything you want to know or anything you want to see, let me know. Leave a comment below. Let me know if you want me to research a particular pilot, an aircraft, whatever you want to work on would be kind of cool. If you got a story you want me to look into, that would be pretty cool. So anyway, you know the drill. Comment, like, subscribe, the whole thing, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.